Hey YouTube, how's everybody doing today? So in this video tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how you can separate your sub bass from your main bass. Now you might be asking yourself, why would I want to do something like that? Why wouldn't I just create one bass layer and call it a day? Well, my friend, there's nothing wrong with that. You could totally do that. But if you're making electronic music, usually you want to have as much control as possible over the different elements within the song so that you can get your mix as loud as possible. And everybody knows how important the bass is, right? It's got to be heavy hitting, it's got to be consistent, it's got to be huge. And in order to do something like that, in order to create a bass that is all of those things, you want to have control over each element in the different frequencies. And you want to make sure that your sub, which is typically 100 hertz and below, is strong and consistent. So in this example here, I have a Reese bass loaded up for the mid bass, and I'll show you guys what that sounds like. Now take a look at the meter here. So you can see that there's a large fluctuation in the overall volume, and it's sitting between like negative 12 dB, and sometimes it pops down almost to negative 24. Well, not quite, but there's a big fluctuation in its volume. And one of the reasons for that is because this type of bass is typically made by detuning different waveforms. So in this patch, I think I've got like a Moog waveform with a saw waveform loaded up, and there's points at which the waves come into sync with each other, so the sound gets louder. There's an additive phenomenon that occurs, and then there's subtractive phenomenon that occurs when the waves go out of sync with each other. So there's this natural rise and fall, which gives the typical Reese bass sound. It's cool, but it's not consistent in terms of its volume. And if we look at the frequencies here on an EQ, you can see there's a lot going on in the low end behind below 100 hertz, right? So that's your sub bass area, and if you were to just leave the layer as is, you would have a rise and fall in volume down there, and it would be inconsistent throughout the song. Now, if that's what you want, nothing wrong with it. But if you want something a little bit more consistent where the level is hitting the same volume every time, you can create like a sub bass layer. Now, some producers will just typically use like a sine wave for consistency because it's really clean, but I think I went a little mental here and I put a square and a saw wave together, and I've just rolled off all of the highs with a Moog 24 low pass filter. And yeah, let's listen to what that sounds like. So take a look at the level. So again, there's fluctuations as the notes change in terms of level, because some are like the lower notes take up more energy, and so they are louder naturally, but there's no fluctuation while the notes are playing. It's more consistent, right? So that's something that typically you want. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn on this effect rack. I've got a utility loaded in, and I've got the sub bass set to mono, which it was already a mono signal, but generally you want to keep anything 100 hertz and below, 120 hertz and below, somewhere in and around there, mono, so that you can maintain stereo compatibility. Now this is just an extra precaution. It's already a mono, it doesn't really need to be there, but whatever. Then what I did was I pulled some of the frequencies below 30 hertz out, which there's people out there who are much more qualified than me. This might be a bad technique, but energy below 30 hertz is generally not really useful. It's not felt or heard that much, I don't think. So it just kind of eats up headroom. So I cut that out. And then I rolled off a little bit of the high frequencies as well. So the meat and potatoes of that sound is still there, right? There's a little bit of harmonics going on within this section here, and that's because I have that square wave with the saw, And again, you can opt to use just a sine wave if you'd like for a more pure tone. There's no right, there's no wrong, whatever sounds better. And then with the Reese here, what I can do now is I've got a bass mono button enabled here, and anything below 100 Hertz is that even though we're going to roll off a lot of that, there's still going to be some of that low frequency energy there. So we want to make sure that's right in the center of the stereo spectrum. And then I've rolled off to 131 Hertz by the looks of it here to keep things kind of clean. But I'm going to bring it up and show you guys what it sounds like before and after while the two layers are there. So if you listen really carefully, once I bring this up to past 100 Hertz, the mud that's present between the two, because there's a lot going on in the Reese below 100 Hertz, plus there's a lot going on in the sub below 100 Hertz, those two frequencies down there, they're clashing and they're low energy, and so there's going to be a lot of phase cancellation and everything's going to sound really terrible. So once you start cutting that out, you allow room for the sub to live down in these frequencies, and you allow your mid bass to live up in here. So basically now you have the ability to level balance between the two. You can bring your sub up or down, and your mid bass up or down as well, and you don't have to worry about too much phase cancellation issues. So yeah, that's a pretty powerful technique, and it's very simple to keep things clean in your low end. So let's listen to the mono compatibility while this is on here. I'll bring this down. You can tell it loses a lot of definition. It's really, I don't really know what the word is to describe it, but it's very like beefy, muddy, washy. There's not much definition, but once you start bringing this up and cutting out some of the lower frequencies, you can really hear that sub a lot clearer, right? So yeah, and then what you do is you have to throw in a drum beat, because it's not done without a drum beat. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know if there's anything else that you want to see, and I will try to get to it. Or if there's a question or comment that you have about this particular tutorial, let me know and I'll try to get to it.